Good morning and thank you for joining us for the stream of Mulberry Schools Trust First Partnership of Equals Conference, taking place today at the QE2 Centre in London. The theme of the conference is gender inequality, and today you will get to hear from an incredible range of speakers and panellists. The first panel of the day will explore gender inequality in dance and will be chaired by Shabana Ji Singh, Artistic Director of Shabana Ji Singh Dance. With Shabana will be Programme Director at the Roundhouse in Camden, Delia Parker, choreographer Julia Cunningham, and choreographer and director Matthew Bourne. After lunch, Theatre Director David Lan will chair a panel exploring gender and Shakespeare. With David will be actors Jada Nuka and Papa Sudu and director Carrie Cracknell. We are also delighted to have Edwina Dunn with us, founder of the Female Lead, who will be delivering the conference keynote speech. The closing speech will be provided by Shami Chakrabarti, Shadow Attorney General and a member of the House of Lords. Dave Nita, Director of Elect, lawyer and poet, will be giving us a special performance before the announcement of the winning poem in the school's poetry competition. Our aim today is to create awareness of the global and national context of gender inequality and the negative impacts it can have on society, as well as how gender equality is important for all people. We will explore the role of the creative arts in breaking down gender inequality and creating a more equitable world. We wish to discuss the obstacles faced by all people in the field and celebrate the achievements of those who are succeeding in it. But above all, we want to discover how young people, as the future world leaders, can shape the change that will occur in our society, whilst empowering each other to succeed in the creative arts. In a couple of minutes, our first panel discussion will begin. We will take a break at 12 o'clock and return at 2 with our keynote speech, followed by the second panel of the day, highlights from the poetry performances and the conference closing address. A pack of conference resources have been produced based on the themes of today. These can be downloaded from the conference website www.partnershipofequals.org to enable you to explore deeper into the issues raised. We would also love you to get involved, so please tweet us at MulberryTH using the hashtag #PartnershipOfEquals. We hope you enjoy watching and are inspired by what you hear today.
Presentations have on dancers, audiences and society.
The panel will be chaired by Shabana Ji Singh, who has been creating a fearless dance for 30 years. Born in India, she currently lives and works in London. Her highly individual and acclaimed work has been witnessed in theatres, outdoor and indoor sites and on film.
She'll be joined by Delia Parker. Delia is Programs Director at the Roundhouse, an incredible live music and performance space, which is also a charity using creativity and the arts to change the lives of young people. Her previous role was Director of the English National Ballet School.
Sir Matthew Bourne is one of the UK's most well-known dance directors and choreographers. For 30 years, he has been directing dance for musicals, opera, theatre and film. Matthew has been recognised by numerous international awards.
Julie Cunningham also joins the panel. Her company made its debut at the Barbican with an expressive double bill about gender and identity. From then, her new works have been presented at the Victoria and Albert Museum, the South Bank Centre and Dance Space at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
Akram Khan wanted to send us this video message because of the importance of the subject today, and we are glad to add his voice to the conversation. We will now show you You're welcome.
Welcome back. For the next part of our day, we hope you enjoyed your break and are feeling refreshed.
We will now move on to part 2 of our day, starting with our panel discussing dance. Each panelist will have 2 minutes to discuss their own journey and tell us a little bit about themselves. After this, the panel chair will ask them a variety of questions to which they will have the chance to respond.
During the panel, if you think of any questions you would like to ask our panelists, please write them down. There will be a chance for you to ask them. You can raise your hand, and once you are recognized by the panel chair, a roving mic will make its way to you.
Before asking your question, please state your name and your school very clearly. Please welcome our first panel for the day to the stage.
Gone the wrong way around,
Yes, we all
haven't
go.
I? So, shall I sit in the middle so I can look down and both you? Okay. Hi, everybody. It's really lovely to be here and to discuss gender and dance with you. And I'm hoping that you'll have lots of really interesting questions up your sleeve to ask us at the end. So for about half an hour, we're just going to talk about dance and gender. With my 3 panelists. So I'm just going to ask each of them to just tell you a little bit about themselves, and also I've asked them to tell you why they think this particular topic is important, which is why they're here to talk to you today. So, Julie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Julie Cunningham. I'm a dancer and choreographer, mostly choreographer, but I still dance. I am based in London, and I started dancing as a young person at my local dance school and trained in London, and then have had a career as a dancer. I spent a long time living in New York, dancing for a contemporary dance company, and then I moved back to London to continue dancing, and I started my own company about 2.5 years ago. And my work is really interested in gender, and I guess trying to find a way of being on stage together that's perhaps not a way that you would normally see people dancing together. So a non-heteronormative way of being on stage.
Thanks. That was good. Matthew.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew Bourne. I was born in London. I was in East London, sort of East Ender. I grew up sort of loving theatre and cinema, and didn't really know much about dance. The sort of dance I knew when I was growing up was in movies or in West End theatre, that kind of dancing. Left school at 18. Sort of soon after that discovered ballet and contemporary dance, which I'd never seen before, and classical music actually, which wasn't something that we'd listened to in my home. And really got obsessed with that, absolutely loved it, saw an enormous amount of work, and that sort of quite late on in life for a dancer encouraged me, having worked for 4 years in various jobs, encouraged me to apply for dance college at the age of 22. And I went to, my first ever dance class was my audition for the Laban Centre, as it was called then. It's called Trinity Laban now, in southeast London. And I got in, weirdly. I was there for 4 years. When I stopped my training, I formed the company I still run. It was basically with a group of friends. It was called Adventures in Motion Pictures at the time, now called New Adventures. That's 30 years ago. I'm still running it. It's a lot bigger than when it started with a group of friends, about 6 friends. We started it, and now we sort of tour the world with productions like you saw a little bit of earlier, Swan Lake, which has just come back. We do more performances a year than any other dance company, I think, in the UK. But it still has that feeling of a group of friends, I hope, and who want to come together and create something for audiences. Reason I'm here, obviously this is a subject I'm very passionate about, gender equality. It's a given. But also, I think the role that dance can play in gender roles is fascinating to me, and can be very important, I think. We have an important role to play as dance makers. The other reason I'm here is I want to hear what you have to say about this, because having choreographed for 30 years and still creating work with a lot of young people, I kind of really want to hear what young people have to say about these issues, because these are things that affect the work that I do. So I'm sort of almost more interested in hearing what you're going to say than rather what we're going to say, I think. But that's why I'm here. I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks. Delia?
Hello, my name's Delia Parker. I'm currently Programmes Director at Roundhouse Theatre in North London. But my journey started many years ago. I was also born in East London, so we'll swap notes later. And I started youth dance around about the age of 11 or 12 and discovered contemporary dance quite early on. So I went off and trained, did my degree at Leicester, which is now De Montfort, and trained as a dancer, and then promptly decided it was really hard work, and tried to think of another way that I could work in dance and not train quite so hard every day. So I moved quite quickly into dance management, and I have spent the last 30 years or so working in dance management, dance funding, working with choreographers, being a tour manager, and had a really great career. I have had being around some fantastic artists and seeing lots of amazing work, and that's been sort of my journey into the field. My previous role was as Director of English National Ballet School, so I've worked with students who have been training and spent their lives training to be ballet dancers, and so part of the reason that I'm interested in today's conversation is, you know, there are lots of young people training every year to become dancers, and these issues are really life to them because they're also training to move into art forms where gender is a big thing, whether it's as a discussion or as a piece of work or as a art form that they've moved into. So I'm really interested in that debate, and I'm also interested in hearing what's live to you right now, as Matthew said, what's live to you in terms of that conversation, and how it impacts how I think about and how I influence it from my end when I go back into my day jobs or into my circles.
Okay. So I'm someone, I wasn't born in the East End. I was born in India, in fact, but spent most of my life in Britain. And in fact, I didn't actually train in a college or had no degrees in dance or dance making. So my route to dance and choreography was kind of quite eccentric. Like most Indian women, my parents never thought I'd want to do anything in the arts. They were a bit disappointed that at the end of university, where I didn't study dance, that I didn't want to be an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer or anybody like that. So for me, it was a real struggle to actually convince my family that really there was a career to be had in professional art and dance making in particular. And as we'll go to talk on a little bit later, you know, dance in my culture wasn't really something that people valued very much. It was something you did as a hobby or perhaps at weddings, but certainly not from, you know, as a serious job. In fact, somebody who shall remain nameless once said to me, well, you know, any job that starts after 6 in the evening, I don't know. I'll start off by, you know, the sort of elephant in the room. Now, in the dance sector, we speak about it a lot, and that's really the fact that as someone who's a choreographer, I can't move for bumping into female dancers, because there are many thousands of them. If I want to find a male dancer, it's always a little bit difficult. Whereas in the world of choreography, I keep bumping into many, many male choreographers, but actually looking for female choreographers is much harder. So there's this kind of huge imbalance, and a lot of words have been written and said about this issue. So I'm really interested in how my panelists, what their view of this is, and how it could be rebalanced. So, Julie, what do you think? There's a lot to say.
Where should I start? Yeah, I mean, it's very true. And
is that a problem? Do you recognize that as a problem? There's fewer female choreographers, or you don't?
I do recognize it as a problem, and I think it's a problem in the scale of things, because I know a lot of female choreographers actually who are at a low, I don't want to say lower level, but they're making, there's a lot of work being made in the independent dance sector by female choreographers, but the people we see at Sadler's Wells on the main stage or on the big stages are not female choreographers for the most part.
So I think it's a matter of scale, because what I notice is that if I looked at resident choreographers or associate artists at the Royal Opera House, you can't help but notice that the majority are male, and also Sadler's Wells, which is another huge dance platform for choreography. So do you think it's because people don't trust women to be in charge of bigger spaces and bigger venues? They're much better doing smaller things, would you think?
I think maybe institutions and organizations are maybe less likely to want to take a risk, and because it's just more normal that men are in charge, that men are getting the opportunities and that support to go to that level. And so there are lots of female choreographers here, but they're not getting the lift to that next level. And it's been for a long time, so now we're in a place where it's like there's a big gap. And if 20, 30 years ago, if female choreographers were getting those opportunities, then it would have gone up together and there would be more equality right now. But it feels like there's a gap now because of that.
So, Matthew, I'm not blaming you.
It's really difficult, being the only man on the panel.
We're very grateful.
Well, first of all, I would just dispute the thing about female dancers to begin with. I mean, my company has more male dancers than female dancers at the moment, and sometimes that's the case. And last year was the first year when, with applications for auditions, we got more men applying than women. So I wouldn't necessarily go along with that, but the question of female choreographers is one that I've seen many interviews with male choreographers who this question is posed, and you can virtually not give an answer which anyone's going to agree with or is going to question. Because I'm in a very privileged position and have been for some time. I think what Julie's saying is right. It's going to take a while for things to change. It feels like this is a subject that's been talked about quite a lot in the last few years, and things have started to happen. People are listening. I feel people are listening, and there's lots of initiatives to bring more female choreographers to the position you're talking about, Julia, where you're presenting work on the big stages, and there are more opportunities there. It's the opportunities that seem to be lacking. And there are some great female choreographers who are starting to emerge and have emerged. Of course, this isn't historical, going back, it's a fairly recent thing that's happened. Many of the greatest choreographers of all time were female in contemporary dance. Ballet has still got quite a long way to go, I would say. They seem to, if they want a female choreographer, they're bringing them from the contemporary dance world, rather than, there seems to be a real issue with female ballet choreographers, classical choreographers. There are very few you can name. I don't know why that is, whether it's something to do with the career path of a dancer in a purely classical world. Maybe it's something to do with that.
Because Julie mentioned scale, and I just wondered, because as we said, there are lots of female choreographers in the contemporary history, because they were all pioneers, but they were very anti-institutional, You know, they actually didn't want to belong to huge buildings or setups. So I just wonder whether that's why it was easier for women to do the, you know, in a kind of more personal and smaller scale. I don't know, what do you think, Delia?
I think that there is part of it. And, you know, I think it's also maybe a little bit, you know, as Julie said, you know, that beginning part of, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the conversations happening in those, you know, in a room of programming, or, you know, you can only program what you're seeing, and we were not having those conversations 20 years ago about where are the female choreographers. We were looking for, actually, we were fighting maybe a different fight for dance, which was how do we get dance more recognised and more into the mainstream. And I think, so the front that we're fighting now is about the gender imbalance around choreographers. I think there is, so there's something about the conversations and the, you know, I remember working at the Arts Council, we always referred to dance as being the Cinderella art form because it had the least amount of investment. It was taking the longest to kind of, I say, grip the nation or grip funders. So I think we are having the relevant conversation now, and that's partly why these initiatives are coming through. You know, there are companies who are featuring female choreographers. There are institutions trying to get female choreographers, you know, into their programming. I think it's a huge ask to suddenly say, coming back to that scale thing, okay, here you go, here's Sadler's Wells, or you know, here's the Royal Festival Hall, go choreograph. If you haven't then had that incremental growth and investment and time to fail and grow and learn in your work as a female choreographer. So it's also slightly, I think, challenging now to suddenly pluck people and say, great, you're female, go make work on this huge scale, because if it doesn't work, it's almost reinforcing whatever might be, you know, under the surface. So, but I think the time is now to have the conversation in a more, you know, maybe having not done anything really for 20 years, we'll make much more progress in the next 5.
Okay, at least we're talking about it. I suppose that's a start.
Well, it also feels a little bit in the last 20 years, but going back a little bit, that there was, talking of gender equality, there was a lot of push in the dance world to try and get young men and boys interested in dance. There's been that sort of thing going on for quite a long time, which appears to have, from what I was saying, appears to have worked somewhat. Yeah. And that seemed to be a force in dance for a while, getting young men interested in dance, which is odd because it's normally the other way around in most professions.
That's right. Yeah, so it's only in the choreographer section.
It's in the
opposite. It's sort of, you know, we need traction in the opposite direction.
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, gender is hugely. I mean, you can't escape gender if you work with dance or choreography because, you know, it's kind of so embedded into how it's made. And I think historically also, I mean, in ballet, for example, you know, men are taught different ways of moving. I mean, their training in technique is very different to if you're a woman, because obviously it's the technique is itself based on the fact that men lift women and not the other way around. In other cultures, you know, the whole of dance is considered a little bit suspect. Because, say, if you looked at pictures of, say, in India, for example, pictures of dancers from the 18th or 19th century, most often you'll see a female surrounded by lots of men spectating. So already there was this kind of, you know, there was a judgment about the female body. And I remember when I went to do a school workshop many, many years ago in Bradford, and it was an Indian classical dance workshop, and I put some bells around my feet. A little boy came and said, my dad says only very loose women wear belts around their feet. So that's a kind of a very long prejudice against dance, because it was also a prejudice against female bodies, because that's really what was kind of coming through. And, you know, in Europe, for example, in the past, dance was a way of controlling, actually, the interaction of men and women. So, you know, in Jane Austen's times, you know, courtship was conducted through dance. And I know when the waltz craze hit Vienna, it was kind of quite suspect because the men and women had to hold each other incredibly close to each other. You know, it was considered an incredibly sexual dance at that time. So you know, dance in various histories, in various cultures, has had a kind of very rocky progression, you know. So, and I think when you look at dance in different cultures, in different histories, it tells you something about that particular culture or country, their attitude towards dance. So what do you think dance as it is now in Britain, what does it tell us about ourselves and about this country? What do you think?
Oh, well, now?
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating because there's so many different forms we're working with now and so many different expressions of self that can come about. For me, I would see it as very personal. And it's a personal expression of who you are and what you believe in and what's important to you. As a dancer and a choreographer, you know, that's what you're expressing. And that, of course, is coloured by your upbringing, your cultural upbringing. If it's in this country, could be very different to, we all come from very different cultural backgrounds in this country. The way you're brought up, peer pressure sometimes can come into play at school and college, about the sort of thing, the image you want to project of yourself. I think it's going to be a very individual thing that's affected by everything around you. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. Julie, what do you think dance at the moment in Britain, what is it telling us about, you know, gender politics for you?
I would say a lot of the work that I see reinforces the gender norms between people.
How so?
I think mostly in the way of like men lifting women and passing them around and they're like they're objects. And I think like the experience of dancing as a female dancer is different from like how it looks. So I'm just talking about how it looks, because when you're a female dancer and you're partnering, you're working really hard and you're like equally working hard together. But how it looks is still very normatively gendered.
So how can we change that, do you think? Or do we want to?
I would like it to. I would like to see other ways of relating to each other, so that we can imagine other ways of relating, and know that there are other ways.
So what does that kind of more gender equal dance? What would that look like?
Well, I don't know. I guess like it's something that I'm exploring in my own work is like when we dance together, how can we help each other more equally? So it's not one person being passed around and being manipulated. That we like work together. That it's a shared way of partnering, and making that visible to the audience. So not only in the experience of doing, but like in the way that it's seen, that there's something that feels equal and cooperative, and then between the group, that's something that feels like we're in this together, and so there's no hierarchy, there's no center of power in this.
So, because you mentioned partnering, because obviously that's a really important part of dance, because, you know, historically, we come from a place where, you know, man was considered stronger and had more muscular strength, so obviously they would be lifting the female. And obviously, I mean, in ballet you can see that a lot. You know, there are movements that the female ballet dancer makes, which is about being compliant, about bending backwards. I mean, the spine, I think in ballets, the use of the female spine, I think is incredibly political, because it's got this kind of, you know, it's a very, yes, I come back to the word compliant. You know, it does these kind of very submissive things, which obviously you don't see. I mean, I'm sure a male spine probably could do the same thing, but we hardly use it that way normally. So you're talking about partnership, but what about when there's no, because choreography doesn't have to involve partnership. So if you're doing a solo dance, how would you make that more gender equal?
I mean, I think I've been thinking a lot about gesture, and because it has so much meaning, you know. So there are gestures that we know, like this. You sort of know what I'm doing.
Or this.
Or like this. like this. So we like read so much into. So I've been looking a lot of images of the female body, but seen through the female gaze, and just trying to like break that down and see if like is it different, or what is that? What is the female body outside of the male gaze, and how can we find that in our own body? Yeah, just trying to get away from something that feels patriarchal. That feels.
I did a documentary a few years back where it was all about male dancing, because that was the thing at the time, quite a few years ago. But one of the I interviewed a few choreographers, and one of the questions that I put to everyone was, do you think there's such a thing as male movement and female movement? It's very interesting, because everyone's like, had to really think about that. And I spoke to Lee Anderson, a very well-known British choreographer who had a female company, then had a male company. And she was the only person, genuinely, who really didn't think about that. The movement was the same for male and female. It didn't occur to her, but she never brought a male and a female together in that sort of sense of being a couple in her work. So she was very interesting on that subject. Mark Morris, I spoke to, didn't really know how to respond initially, and said, no, there isn't such a thing, you know. And I said, but sometimes I've seen in your work, sometimes you use sort of what I would say is feminine movement on male dancers to comic effect. So you are, in a sense, using that. And it's interesting, because I think we don't necessarily want everyone to be equal in what they can bring to dance, is what I feel about it, to a certain extent. And also, as a storyteller, in my work, it's always narrative, and it's people playing a role, or in everything I've ever done virtually. So I need them to be, they can't be sort of sexless character, they have to represent the sex that they are. The thing that I can bring to it is play with gender roles within that. You know, should this character, in a well-known story, should that character be male or female? Let's be open about that. Let's sort of, would it be interesting to shake it up and change the gender of a character? And that starts to open up different questions and interesting new stories to tell, rather than the conventions that have gone before.
And I think it also does depend on the dance form, or I spend quite a lot of time not seeing as much contemporary dance as I used to. I'm actually seeing much more street dance, hip hop, African-based dance forms, and so therefore that gender role play, that male movement, that partnering, the way the work is constructed isn't in gender. So if you watch something like Crumpin is that it's about self-expression. It's not about, this is what you do because you're a man, or this is what you do because you're female. Hip hop, street dancing, locking, all of those movements, or even when you bring them together in a narrative, very rarely is there a, you will lift me because I am the man and you are the woman. You will lift me because that is what we want to do in this particular part of what we're trying to say. And so I think we can get caught up a little bit, because these art forms, ballet, contemporary dance, are at the forefront of some of our conversations, because that's what we see in the main, to think that is the norm. Whereas actually, if you start looking at other forms of dance, you don't always see those stereotypes reinforced in the same way. And I think it's important to remember.
Yeah, because I think they all come from different places. Their histories are very different. I mean, I was listening to the fantastic conversation between Jude and Grayson Perry just earlier today. And one of the things he said, and he said many interesting things, was he just wondered whether, good politics necessarily make good art. And I was thinking about his comment when I watched that lovely collage that we just saw of different types of dance, and from the ages and different cultures. And I just wondered, because that's a bit of a point of, I think it's a very interesting point, because I don't know, because obviously one can get the politics perfect, but I don't know whether that actually necessarily makes good art. I often think about that, because when I was looking at the collage, I don't know whether you saw that, Julie, did you see the collage? No. So there was a clip of Bollywood Dancing, which was actually not that dissimilar to the Beyonce or to Pan's people, for example, because there, in all those things, you saw women displaying themselves in an incredibly sexually tantalizing way and doing, you know, very gripping but, you know, very sexy moves, and which the camera really highlighted by, you know, zooming in on their hips or their face. And but in the Bollywood movie, the men also were displaying their body and being incredibly sexual. So now, you know, actually as a piece of just performance, it's very seductive because it's fast, it's zippy, it makes you want to tap your toes and get up on this stage and start moving, you know. And then you saw ballet where typically woman was lifted by man and the woman was looking incredibly ethereal and, you know, beautiful in a way. I mean, you can't deny that the whole thing had a charm. Then you had Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers doing the tap dance, and again, you know, they were both doing exactly the same movement, so they had equality, but she was in a dress and we could see her legs and he wasn't. And you obviously also saw the partnering conventions, which you know, you see in the waltz.
Yeah.
So it's a very complicated mixture, isn't it? And I mean, do you have any, as a person who's obviously thought really deeply about the politics of dance, do you just take for granted that actually in getting your politics right, you're actually going to also make good art? Or you don't think about it like that?
I don't know. I think it's just because I'm like really interested and I really care about it, and it's at the heart of what I do. I like can't not question it or have it be a part. And I think, like, ideally, it's like trying to get beyond it, and trying to say that it's a group of people. First of all, it's people, and it's about bringing out the person rather than the gender of the person.
Right.
So, yeah.
Do you think you could see a bit of Bollywood dance and think that's really interesting and, you know, pleasing to the eye, though I don't actually like the politics of it? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think you can have both of those things. I can't help but get annoyed just because it's me. Yeah. But I think you can still appreciate the person who's doing that beautiful thing.
Yeah, and the sort of technique. Yeah. I suppose, you know. The skill. The skill.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I did a talk as part of Jude's Women of the World where I spoke about the kind of the conflict. So working in a ballet school where we've got very strongly opinionated young people between the ages of 16 and 19, very clear about their gender politics, as you know, millennials, or you know, they're very, very clear about how they feel about who they are and what their bodies are there for and how they want to use them, and they are very happy to go and train into an art form where the women will be dainty most of the time, and the men will be strong and strap-in princes. And they have no problem with that, because for them the pursuit of being a great ballet dancer is their foremost goal at the moment. And what they want to do is they want to do that well. They want to be the best ballet dancer in the world. When we then said to them, okay, now this is your choreographic assignment, you can go and make your own piece of work, that's where their politics would come in. That's where they'd put the boys in point shoes, they'd put the girls in army fatigues, that's where their politics always came in. But they were really, really happy to be the best that they could be in that art form that was saying, you will be like this and you will be like that. Whether you feel or agree with it, this is what the form requires of you. So I think you can appreciate the endeavour of an art form and not necessarily appreciate the politics of it. And I think that's, for me, is the great debate about art, is that you can see something amazing, but the journey to that may not fit with your values or your judgment at all. And we have our right then to go and respond to that in whichever way we want.
So, Matthew, have you ever seen a piece of dance where you hate the politics but love the dance, or vice versa?
Well, I mean, for me, I think about politics when I'm making work.
You don't?
No, because I make work. My my job, I feel, is to create something to entertain people. That's what I'm doing it for. But naturally, who you are and what you believe in and what's important to you, if it comes through in your work. Your instinct is to do this, this, and this, and not that.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't bring it to the fore in that sense. I wouldn't bring it to the fore, but I think it represents who you are, and therefore, it has an attitude, a stance on something. I don't know whether to call it politics or not, but it represents you. So I feel that that's the way it should be. But I don't know whether I've seen a piece where the politics is good and there probably are a lot of works.
It's really easier to find
probably a lot. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you know, one of your sort of seminal pieces was Swan Lake, and so it obviously came from, that's a political piece. I mean, I think the politics is very much in the foreground. I mean, what made you change all the swans into males? I mean, what was your thinking?
Well,
was it just entertainment?
I know I'm being a bit provocative by saying that in some ways, but I do believe in that. I felt I needed to do something different because I felt I had to break the image that people had in their heads. If I was going to do this piece, Swan Lake, the most famous dance piece, ballet piece, if I was going to do it, I had to do something very different with it. And male swans seemed to be a great idea initially, but then the more I delved into it, it became more psychological, more interesting as a story, having a prince who was drawn towards this creature that was a male creature, but was something that maybe that he wanted to be, that represented all the things that he wasn't. It became more interesting to me as a story. And it became a statement. It tackled issues of sexuality, which were not really explored in dance at that time, very much at all. And I've been doing that for some time. I mean, almost the most bold thing to do in dance with two men is something very romantic and simple. You can do a lot of aggressive kind of stuff together, to put two men together and create something that's that has different things to say, different stories to tell. But actually, the most radical thing to do in dance at that time was put two men together in a seemingly romantic setting, and that created people walking out at the time. You know, people walked out of the theatre, particularly men, of course, when that happened. When the two men, Prince and the Swan, started dancing together, several men would get up and walk out. And now, today, it's Bring the Family show, Christmas tree at Sadler's Wells. You know, it's sort of, that's how things have changed. But it was fairly radical at the time, I suppose.
Yeah, right, that's interesting. So just a last question. It's a very practical one. Obviously, do you think we're all kind of moving towards a kind of a less binary concept of dance? Is that a good thing? And, you know, can dance making and dance practice, can it actually move this forward? Or do you think dance making in itself, in a way, is it in our interest, you know, to move beyond a binary definition of gender? Are we going to like lose or are we going to gain? What do you think, Julie?
I really, really hope we can get beyond the binary.
Yeah.
Me, myself, not feeling part of the binary or in one or the other.
Yeah.
And I think just what I was saying before, I mean, the most interesting thing is seeing people on stage and not somebody who's been put into a box, but like really seeing people and connecting with those people. So yeah, I really hope. And I think it would be more interesting and we'd see more variety of people
dancing. And
people dancing, and you know, along the spectrum and all over.
What about
I think, like Julie's saying, I think what Julie's doing actually, I think we need to see more different stories being told through dance. There's too many conventions and there's too many conventional forms of dance. Some of those things are forms. There was discussion about Strictly, hasn't there, with ballroom dancing. It is a form, and it's very difficult to judge it if it's two women or two men dancing together. It's not the form. there are other ways of doing it. You know, if you're talking about that show, the professionals could be doing stuff that showed us different kind of stories, different kinds of ways of dancing together. But I think we do need more different stories being told and represented on our stages.
Okay. Delia?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, we're in the now, and I think different people making work, as Matthew said, different people telling different stories, different programmers making different decisions about what they support, and audiences being willing to go and support the work, because I think, you know, it's fine making the work, but if audiences say, but all I want to see is this, then programmers are only going to program this. So I think the more that we're open to saying, I want to see something that is more representative of society as a whole, or art as a whole, or different voices, the more that programmers will say, actually, that's going to sell. I'm going to program that. That person's making great work. I'm going to invest there. So I think there's two sides to that.
That's a very good point.
But programs always tend to have more power than people, because they own the bricks and mortar.
That's right.
They own the stage, they own the platform, or they have access to the platform.
Absolutely.
So the ordinary person hasn't really got the grants and the resources to say, well, actually, I'm going to now, you know, give myself the chance to see X type of dance. So, and I think, you know, because I've seen myself how different programmers, in fact, they've been willing to play the long game, so make financial losses at the beginning because they actually believe in a particular vision.
Absolutely.
So I think it plays both ways,
Absolutely,
really.
yeah, it does. It really does.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we come to the really interesting part, which is answering your questions, and I'm really hoping that you have lots of interesting questions to put to our panelists. So I understand there's a mic. So actually, I really can't see you that well because there's a light in my eyes. But
there's several mics all over.
Is there anyone? Are there any questions? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to have like 2 questions.
It looks like you haven't set up
dear, I'm sorry. That shouldn't be working.
Oh, good.
So there's questions over there, and there's questions there.
Waving over there.
Yeah.
So you want to start over there, Shabana? There's one right over the back.
Okay, yeah.
There's one.
Okay, there was someone. Okay, I'll take that person over there and then you together, okay?
My question was that are females who participate in creative arts obligated to play a submissive and so-called feminine role in productions?
I'm really sorry, I just
You say it one more
couldn't
time.
hear. Could you just speak a little bit slower, perhaps?
Are females who participate in the creative arts obligated to play a submissive and so-called feminine role in productions?
I'm just going to repeat that. So are you saying about female artists, are they asked to
Are they obligated to play a submissive?
To play a submissive or a feminine role? Okay, and another question that we can think about at the same time over here? Yeah.
Would you say that the impact on the structure or the story that a dance tells would be different if a male and female choreographer were to work together on a piece, or like rather than individually?
Okay, fine. So there are these 2 questions. One is, are female artists just obligated to play submissive roles? And then would a story look very different if a male and a female choreographer were telling it?
It's the same, it's almost a similar question in a way, because if talking about more female choreographers, we're not necessarily going to want to put women in that position always. A male and female choreographer working together, it could produce something different. I don't know, but it's that's a collaboration, and why not? But I don't know what it would produce that was different in a way.
I think it's worth saying that not all women think alike, and not all men think alike. So it'll be more reflective probably of their own personal tastes in choreography. It's quite difficult actually to make a piece of choreography together. I remember when I was in China, somebody actually asked me to do that, to choreograph with someone else, which is actually a bit of a challenge because we had very diametrically opposite ideas about what we wanted to say with the dancers. So I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have actually 2 friends who work together, a male and female choreographer. They always make work together.
Right.
But I think it's really about like if it's a good team, because as you said, it can be really challenging if you have really different opinions and you just like going like this, or if you like really can work together and enjoy each other's opinions and ideas.
Julie, are they also the performers? Do they choreograph on themselves? Not always.
Yeah, so they made something on me together.
Oh, right. Okay.
And actually it was really nice because they had like very different ways of explaining things, so I got a lot from them in different ways, and it was interesting. Yeah.
And do you think female dancers feel obliged to play the submissive role?
No.
Less and less so.
I think, yeah.
No.
I suppose it depends on what they're in.
I think it depends on what you're doing, because I think if you are 18 and you've just got into the most fabulous ballet company in the world, you are going to be in a submissive role in that corps de ballet for a little while. It doesn't mean you are submissive in yourself as a person, as an individual, but your role in the corps de ballet is going to look pretty and stay in line. And there is a real and I think we have to acknowledge that is something they're going to be asked to do, but that does not for 1 minute mean that that young woman is submissive in her personality or in her day life, if you see what I mean. I think it's...
I think I know that certainly in Indian classical dance, I know people who, because in the traditional repertoire, often, as in all, historic stories, especially love stories, the woman is always cast as the person who doesn't take the big initiative. They're the ones who are waiting for their lover to turn up. I mean, sometimes it felt like the whole of your dance life, you're just waiting for your boyfriend to turn up, who doesn't actually turn up at the right time. Or just come in through the door. And then people do actually, after a while, get fed up as dancers and as people playing that same role, and sometimes they change and they actually become contemporary dancers for that very reason, because they just feel the shackles of being that the person who's always compliant and obeying the rules. So I think that can happen. I think, as I say, it all depends on what type of dance work you're doing. Other people seem to, as you're saying, they're happy to take it as a technical exercise as opposed to a political exercise, and they're happy to do that role of being the swooning
But it's also a journey towards what their goal is, I suppose, as well, that they would accept that. But and also, you're probably right, that some people love it as well. They're not putting up with it. They're loving it.
They love doing the role, correct. Because they probably just see it in a way as a physical thing as well as much more than a sort of a political thing.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah?
Do you believe there is any one group of people who dominate dance as a career field?
Are there any one group of people who...
dominate dance as a career field?
Who don't make dance as a career?
Who dominate dance as?
A career?
Yeah, people who dominate dance as a career field.
Okay, so is there any one particular group who tend to become either dancers or... okay, and one more question? Yeah, in front? Yeah. Yes?
Is there a mic? Is somebody at the front?
No, yeah.
Oh.
Yes, yeah.
She hit better without the mic.
Yeah, possibly. It's a bit clunky. Maybe if they stood up. Yeah.
To challenge gender roles, is it best to sort of get men to play traditionally feminine roles, women to play traditionally masculine roles, or to sort of meet in the middle where there are no gender roles which either of them are playing?
Thank you. That's a good question. Okay, so is dance and choreography dominated by one sector in society, like I suppose middle class sector as opposed to working class sector, or maybe one ethnic group more than the other? Delia, what do you think?
I think there's a definite imbalance in terms of the diversity of dance that we see, although it is much better than when I came into the sector. So I think You know, we can see, you know, there are, in the same way that we are, I guess, still having a conversation about female choreographers. I read something in preparation for today. I read something there where there was a quote that someone said, "Oh, we're still talking about gender equality in dance, but we are still talking about ageism in dance. We are still talking about cultural diversity in dance in terms of what people are seeing. But it is all better than it was before, and it will continue to get better. I don't feel anymore. For instance, there is such a challenge in terms of I think you see yourselves represented probably more so now than ever before on television. I think it is the fact we're having a conversation, we're having questions about, you know, whether dance will ever move to being non-binary is a huge leap forward. So I think that there is a dominance, but I think it's you know, it's the way that dance has developed. It's historical. The forms, there are forms that are more mainstream than others, but that does not mean that on any given night of the week, particularly in London, you can't go and see the dance you want to see if you know where to look for it. So I think, yeah, I think there's a dominance, but I'm not as concerned about it as I used to be.
I think what you were saying about some sort of meeting in the middle of male and female roles it's terrible for storytelling. You know, for storytelling, a story where everyone is equal and the same and all, you know, it's not a good story actually. So you need those things to play with to create a good story. So partly what you're saying is something that I've done quite a lot of, is changing the sex of the swans, obviously. But in other stories, I changed the sex of the fairy godmother in Cinderella as a male angel in my version. I did a version of the Oscar Wilde's book Dorian Gray, where all the leading characters, the powerful characters, were all men, and the one female character was not a very powerful figure. I changed the sex of Lord Henry, who was the biggest influencer of the main character, and it's a powerful female figure, because I felt that the imbalance was not great for now. So you can do things like that, but that's good. That's about storytelling as well. For me, that's the important thing. You need those differences. You need to play with those things to create an exciting story. This would be different from the world of different forms of dance could express what you were talking about actually more clearly, but and maybe what Julie's talking about as well. But for me, a story is not great where everyone is equal.
So I think maybe it's what you were saying before about we need to tell different stories. So it's not like about making everybody equal. It's like telling stories that tell of different types of experiences. I think maybe that's more.
Because I think there's this kind of idea of uniformity, which is not actually what we're talking about either. So I don't think the ideal is everyone's the same. I think everyone's equal is a bit different because it means there's diversity. For example, the piece that I've just finished making, it's a piece about the Spanish influenza, 1918. So it's not a traditional story as in, you know, boy, girl, meeting or whatever. But I actually made a decision to make it all female because one of the aspects of this particular incident was it's a story that's sort of largely forgotten because it was mostly in the diaries of volunteer nurses. So there was a kind of a reason to make it all female because I wanted to, even though the dancers at different points, even viruses. So sometimes there's a kind of a narrative reason to actually say, well, actually, this particular piece, I'm going to restrict it to. Other pieces, you might think, well, actually, no, I do want male and female because there is a difference, not in terms of the way they move, but just who they are and the history that they kind of bring to the studio. I mean, in this question about is it dancing dominated by one sector, I suppose one thing is that it's very dominated by young people. And that's something actually that is beginning to change. There are more older people who are dancing because it's just taken for granted that you've got to be young and fit. to dance, but that's not always the case, is it?
No, I mean, I think when I was a young dancer, I just thought, okay, when I'm like 35,
I'll have to stop.
I'll have to stop and find a new career.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wait, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have to. I mean, I worked for a choreographer who died when he was 90. He was working until like the week before he died.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's a really good role model. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to retire.
Yeah.
Last question.
Any other questions?
Well, one more question. Last question.
One more, apparently.
Okay.
Do minority groups have a lower chance of opportunity in dance?
Do minority groups have an opinion? And then just one more from there. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Samira and I'm from Mulberry School for Girls. The question I have for you is, as individuals in dance, how easy was it to find role models who looked like you when you were our age?
Okay. It's kind of quite interlinked. So there are lots of dance from ethnic minorities. I won't do the obvious and answer that myself. Yes. I'll pass that on to Matthew first.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, there were lots of people who looked like me, so I suppose, when I went into dance. But actually, when I did go into dance, it was, this is something that I probably, the reason I didn't go into it so late, that I did go into it so late, was because I was worried about what my peers thought about me dancing. So I suppose I was restricted in some way in terms of my gender. Is that I would be very nervous at school to say that I went to a dance. I did used to do sort of amateur dance things when I was a kid, and I would be very nervous about saying that and admitting that. And I used to go to this local dance school that we put on shows and things, but they used to do a ballet warm-up. And I used to turn up after that. I wouldn't do the ballet. I thought that was almost giving in too much to being a dancer, and that it would be, people would laugh at me and it would be frowned upon. So in a way, I suppose that my journey into dance was restricted by my sex in some ways. I think I probably would have got into it. I loved it, I loved it when I was young. It was the obvious thing for me to do, but I didn't do it. I didn't have the confidence to go into it till I was in my early 20s. So.
I think just to answer that question about ethnic minorities and dancing, obviously the answer is in the word minorities. So obviously as a group, there are probably fewer dancers just because there are probably fewer of Asian and African and Caribbean people in Britain, I would imagine. But obviously there are cultural reasons why, for example, the community I come from, there are not many professional dancers. There are often people who dance who also have other careers. So I think certainly for the Asian community, till the arts is considered something as a worthwhile career, that probably won't change. On the other hand, dancing as a communal activity is very popular. There's no Indian wedding where people aren't dancing. And there's lots of incredibly beautiful folk dances which people still practice in Britain. So I think it's a kind of complicated territory. And so the question about, did you find people who looked like yourself when you were beginning to dance?
No.
Really?
Not like me right now.
Okay.
But I didn't really look like me right now.
Okay.
I had like long hair and a bun.
Okay.
And,
oh, long hair and a bun.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did.
All right.
Yeah. So.
I'm trying to imagine you, long hair and a bun.
Yeah. There's some pictures. But,
okay.
Yeah, because I started doing ballet, so I just looked at ballet dancers. I was like, I really want to do that.
Yeah.
And then I discovered contemporary dance, and then I was like, all right, there's a lot of other possibilities.
Yeah,
I can also
true.
be a lot of different things, not just this one thing.
All right, I think that's a good place to stop. And so thank you very, very much for being a fantastic audience, for asking really interesting questions, and thanks to the wonderful panelists here. Thank you.
Thank you to all our panelists for such a dynamic discussion. In a moment, we will have a chance to see a dance performance